Welcome to Work from the Inside Out, a podcast that highlights real-life stories, practical strategies, and best practices for transitioning your career from unhappiness and dissatisfaction to fulfillment, meaning, and joy. Now here is your host, career and executive coach, Tammy Guler-Loeb.
Hey everyone, I am really excited to introduce my guests today. That's right, you heard it. I have plural, 2 guests today, one of whom is returning to Work from the Inside Out, Rimi Chakraborty. She joined us last year, and she brings with her her partner in crime, Samantha Anderson, and they have written a book together called Beyond Resilience to Rootsilience. I'm going to tell you about that in a moment. Rimi and Samantha rejoice in inspiring women to redefine success. Their book, Beyond Resilience to Rootsilience, shifts consciousness toward a new leadership paradigm that is rooted in well-being, balance, and health. Rimi is a keynote speaker, author, yoga teacher, and leadership consulting coach for groups, teams, and individuals dedicated to developing conscious leaders. She holds a BSE from the University of Pennsylvania and an MBA from the MIT Sloan School of Management, as well as various certifications in forest yoga, yin yoga, energy healing, energy medicine, and yoga for trauma. She is the co-founder of Minuvita Azores, an immersive travel and learning experiences business in San Miguel, Azores, Portugal. Samantha Anderson is a national board certified functional medicine, health, and wellness coach with decades of experience as a nonprofit and philanthropy consultant. She speaks widely to a variety of audiences, offering practical tools to help women leaders cultivate purpose and vision while connecting to their whole selves and to that which restores balance. Samantha received a BA from Tufts University and earned an MA in U.S. Women's History from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. She is a Koya-inspired movement teacher, a Reiki master, and a She Recovers coach, working with women on all forms of addiction. Please join me in welcoming Rimi Chakraborty and Samantha Anderson. Welcome, Rimi and Samantha.
Hello, Tam.
Woohoo! Well, so as you both know, and Rimi's done this with me before on Work from the Inside Out, and Samantha, thank you for joining us from your home office in the Berkshires, sort of my neighbor in Massachusetts. As you know, we like to begin at the beginning and learn a little bit about your early years, your formative years, and how they may have informed where you are today. And you have such rich and interesting backgrounds, and you bring so much to the work that you've done in this book, which is so exciting. So actually, let's start with you, Samantha. Take us back to your early years and tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you are today.
Thank you, Tammy. It's such a pleasure to be here. I'm very excited to have this conversation. So my beginning years, my origin story starts in northern New Jersey, in the suburbs of New York City, where I was raised in a pretty, protected suburban environment. Just south of the city. I lived with my parents and my sister, and most of my early days, I would say, were spent sitting around the dinner table, listening to my parents talk about business.
Mm-hmm.
They had a family business. My father was a management consultant, and my mother assisted him as a bookkeeper in the business. And I remember many a dinner sitting around the table, listening to the trials and tribulations of, being an entrepreneur and what it was like building a business. My father's particular specialty was industrial psychology. Uh, he had a degree actually also from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And I just grew up listening to the stories of the management that he was working with to help their companies with performance, with employee satisfaction. That was really the orientation of their business. And just kind of as a child, listened in, kind of curious about what it was like building a business. The particular content of the business was very interesting to me. And I was kind of captured by how people, what makes them tick,
Yeah.
motivates them, why some will perform to great heights and some don't. What are the conditions that make for a productive workplace culture? All of that was kind of the themes of my childhood.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can really relate to what you're talking about, having had parents who were also in helping professions, helping people um, grow and move their lives forward in different ways. But I can really relate to that sort of dinner table conversation and being really interested in learning about what adult work lives were like and what kinds of things they were interested in and all of that. And yeah, I can really relate to that. So take us forward from there. You
Right.
went to Tufts and then you
I
studied
did.
women's history and yeah.
I went to Tufts. I graduated with a degree in history. And then I pursued my master's also in history, in women's history. And I actually thought I was going to be a professor. I thought,
Mm.
oh, that sounds like a really cool job, like teaching. And I went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and I sat through two very, very cold winters. And I realized that for most of the people in my PhD program, they were there for a dozen plus years.
Hmm.
And that wasn't so interesting to me, being in a
Hmm.
very cold environment for another dozen years. So I called my dad the summer after I got my master's degree. And it was a juncture where I had to decide if I was going to continue on for my PhD. And I said to him, this doesn't seem like the best fit for me. I need to be out in the world doing this work and doing some work. I wasn't entirely sure what. I think I might have said this work. And he said to me, why don't you come home for the summer? Come to work with me for a
Mm.
few months just to get your kind of like your sort of life settled a little bit. You'll have a little bit of income. You'll figure out what it is that you ultimately want to do. Well, that summer became another 12 some odd years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So all those nights sitting around listening to them talk about the family business, something sunk in.
Wow. How cool is
And
that?
I just loved it. I loved working beside my dad. I loved the opportunity to really unpack what effective workplaces look like. And my dad as one of the founders of the employee satisfaction survey, which was
Oh.
developed for the Bell System companies in the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
The Bell system no longer exists, but for those of us at a certain age, we would remember what that is.
I remember.
So he was one of the founders of of those kinds of instruments, and he had crafted a very interesting methodology looking at the intersection between employee satisfaction and customer satisfaction.
Ah.
And we created a very unique survey tool that mapped employee satisfaction with the Baldrige criteria, which at the time, this is going back into the 90s, was really the criteria to look at best in class performance of
Mm.
customer service.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a really powerful instrument to look at high performing workplaces and high and high customer service ratings and how aligned they can be. And when there's disconnect, what happens? And just pulling at a few levers on
Yeah.
either side of that equation can really make the difference.
Wow. Wow. And you were there at those early days of that. Wow, that's really cool to hear about, because these are things I look at all the time. So 12 years, what happened after 12 years? Did you make a significant pivot, or how did
Yeah.
you go forward from there?
So my father died.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So he died in April of 20, April 20, oh gosh, 2001.
Mm.
Yeah, it's been a long time. He died suddenly. He had a heart attack. Actually, just moments after swimming in the swimming pool with my son, who's now my eldest.
Mm-hmm.
He was just about 18 months old, and he just kind of collapsed after getting out of the pool. And so that business ultimately went away.
Ah,
And I pivoted to a different career, which I can talk more about. But I also want to allow Rimi
sure.
to share a little bit too.
Sure. I do want to stay with you for one more moment,
Sure.
though. So I'm sure it was, very traumatic to lose your dad so suddenly. And yet I'm curious as to, did you want to continue on with the business, or was it like without him, it just didn't have the same meaning for you, or were you thinking about going in other directions anyway at that point? I'm just sort of curious about
Yeah.
where
Thank
you were
you.
at.
Well, we were continuing to do the work that I had described to you,
Mhm.
and I had also picked up a number of nonprofit clients. That work was very, very meaningful to
Ah, uh-huh.
so helping nonprofits also with their performance and workplace
Hmm.
culture and fundraising strategy
Oh,
and
I see.
mission alignment. And you know, yeah, I was very interested in revenue generation for nonprofits, and
Ah,
actually pivoted a lot of my work to social entrepreneurship.
I see. Okay.
So so after he died, it was a natural progression to go from working exclusively with corporations to both nonprofit
Right.
companies.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, it does to me, at least. Having being a fundraiser in recovery
Mhm.
myself and having been in that world, I can see where you could translate that, because there are elements of fundraising and development that really parallel in some ways sales and marketing. And it's another way. It's for a nonprofit. That's how they make their, in quotes, profits, even though they're not profits, right? But there's nonprofits are still businesses. People don't realize that. They still have to stay afloat. So that makes perfect sense. So yeah, well, thank you for sharing that. That's so fascinating to go from that sort of academic track in the study of history to really taking that much deeper dive into uh, employee engagement and workplaces, work cultures, and then working with social sectors and nonprofits. So Rimi, let's go to you.
Oh,
So
sure.
Rimi, so we've covered a little bit of your early years, actually quite a bit, I think, in our previous episode, and I want to encourage people to listen to that. But give us a few of those broad brushstrokes and take us, along so that we can then talk about how you and Samantha got together and created the work that you're doing together today.
Sure. Well, Tammy, it's such a pleasure to be back. And so thank you again.
My pleasure.
As you know, and maybe some of your readers or listeners remember, I actually was born in Alabama. So my roots start in the South, and I am a North Indian gal in the South, and I'm a first generation American. So what that means is my parents, both of my parents were born in India, and they came over here when they were in their 20s. And I was born in Alabama because my dad was a physicist and he was working at the University of Alabama. And so that's why we were there. And I am an only child. My parents ended up not having any other children. And also they met on their wedding day.
Oh, that's
and so
right.
That's another interesting fact. Because they met on their wedding day, got married, which is very traditional for if anyone knows folks from India. I mean, it still goes on today, and there's some new ways of being, but that is still very common. But then they were completely uprooted, and they were in a new country without their networks. And we ended up moving to the Philadelphia area when I was about 8, because my father had an opportunity to be at the University of Pennsylvania. And it was then that, the big values in my family were always around success. It was always about, getting the best grades, being in the best professions, going to the best schools. These were lauded, as I think they are in many immigrant, communities and cultures. And I remember, my dad used to do long division problems with me I think I was in like first grade.
Oh my goodness.
Still learning to read. And my friends would come home with, B's and C's on their report card and get $20 for every B. And I remember if I came home with an A-, it was like, why is there an A- amidst an otherwise grade A? And so I always had this push to succeed. And I was very grateful, and I'm very lucky, I guess, that doing well in school came easily to me, which I know is not something that comes well to everyone. And that was just something that did come easily. And so then when there was a rift in my family, mostly because my parents' marriage, unfortunately, after 17 years, started to fall apart. And my mother, she had always, grown up in a society where she had a lot of support. And then being in a new country where she didn't, she fell into alcoholism.
Yeah.
And growing up around that and living with her, I ended up asking for attention in all the wrong ways. And that got me into, a lot of trouble in terms of, being on a first name basis with the police, if you can believe it, and being in a gang. And yet I was still getting straight A's at school, and there was a huge disconnect. And, long story short, I was able to, my parents had an intervention. There was an incident where I just got into so much trouble, and my parents finally came together, and it was decided that I would move into my father's home. He had remarried at the time, and so I was going to be in a more stable home. I moved to a new school system, which was significantly more challenging. I couldn't just get straight A's, without blinking. I really had to work hard.
Oh, wow.
And I joined the track team, which gave me a place to put my intense energy. And, those 3 things really contributed to my improvement, and things slowly got better over time. And so I then went on to, as people have heard from my bio, I went on to an Ivy League school, and, I continued the path to success. And then I ended up, after business school, finding myself in a job where the culture was very much work hard, play harder. And it was incredible. It was fun. It was a wild ride, but it was really unhealthy. And I found myself just burning both ends of the candle, meaning I was, at networking events up at the crack of dawn, skipping breakfast. And then I would have a liquid dinner, which meant having wine and drinks over networking events. And I started to realize that this drive to success was very much out of alignment with what success meant to me and what I really authentically felt about it. And that's when I started to have a chance to reevaluate those values that were so instilled in me.
Yeah. Yeah. So take us forward from there.
Sure. Well, so this is when Samantha and I met so many years. Well, actually, I have to back up a little bit. So I did leave the corporate world because of my husband. So back in, it was 2013, my husband and I got married in the Azores, which is an archipelago in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. And it's where my husband's originally from. And we did a destination wedding. And, I was sitting with these existential questions around purpose and success. And it just felt like the right time to take a leap towards a new world, literally. And my husband and I, he was an editor and a journalist. And, I had been working in management consulting around location strategy. And we decided, let's leave that behind. Let's start a new business around our values. And let's build a business focusing on elevating consciousness, which is about recognizing the connection that exists amongst us all. The connection that you and I are connected. We're connected to the trees. We literally breathe their exhale. The trees breathe our inhale.
Mm-hmm.
So we started this business, which is a lodge and learning center. And that's when I met Samantha, because Samantha and her husband came as guests.
Oh.
Yeah.
And so go ahead.
Right. So I just need to like fill in one little, gap in my story too, which is that I too had kind of that moment of purpose, consciousness. What am I doing? And I entered into the decade that my father passed away, which was my 50s, and had lived a pretty hard life from the day my dad died to when I was about 50 or so. And I had also gotten divorced, and just a lot of trauma and grief around his passing that, I don't want to just wash over. That's a very important part of my origin story too.
Appreciate that. Yeah.
And it connects to what, how Rimi and I met. So I actually went back to school just as I was approaching my 50th year to become a functional medicine health coach, and because I was experiencing a lot of really odd, weird medical conditions that I just couldn't put together. And I was sent to all sorts of specialist physicians who just couldn't really understand my whole body. And a very dear friend of mine said, have you ever heard of functional medicine? They look at they do intensive lab testing, and they look at root causes of conditions, not just at the symptoms that you're experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
That was just this aha moment, like, yeah, of course, that's what I need to be doing. But at 50, I wasn't going to go back to medical school. I was going to take the shorter path to learn. And that was the coaching program that I did. And it was right at that time where my husband, who also has Azorian lineage, was it was investigating his own family history, and we were returning multiple times to the Azores. And on one of our trips, we stayed at Minovita, Rimi and Joao's lodge, and Rimi and I just fell in love with each other.
Oh,
yeah.
I love that. I have goosebumps.
Yeah, it was really special. And we originally talked about planning a retreat together because we also host retreats at our center. And originally the idea, Samantha was just about to finish her functional medicine coaching program. And so the idea was food and yoga as medicine. Mm-hmm. And how do we start to use those as tools in our toolkit for well-being? Mm-hmm. And we planned it for April of 2020, which as we all know, the retreat didn't happen. But what did happen was Samantha was in Brooklyn, New York at the time. And of course I'm here, and we were having these Zoom calls that for some reason we just said, let's just put it on our calendar once a week and continue. And for me, I don't know actually for you, Samantha, but it was the only thing I was getting up and brushing my teeth for and remembering what day it was, because in that time it was like, I don't know what day it is. I don't know up from down. And we just shared with each other, both being in this coaching, holding space for others world. We shared with each other that we actually weren't feeling held or supported. And instead we were being told, be resilient, push harder, you got this. And it just was like, and here in the Azores, it was like, vai ser tudo bem, everything's going to be okay. And it was just like, well, but what about all the things that aren't okay? Can we just hold that for a second?
Yeah. And it's like, you got this. You got what?
Yeah.
Everyone around it, like, we don't even know what day it is, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And so then Samantha and I were just sharing, and we started recording our Zoom calls, which we had that insight, which was amazing. So we still have the exact moment. Oh. And Samantha one day just blurted out, I'm tired of being told to be resilient. We need to be rootzilient.
Oh.
And it was like, ding, 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 like new word. And I was like, wait, what did you just say? And, and we I remember we were like, we both felt something really big around that. And then we ended up running Rootsilience, which is about going beyond resilience, as an online course. And we ran the first version of it right after the pandemic. I believe it was December of 2020.
We were still very much in the pandemic. Yeah.
Yeah. And so each time we ran the course, we had the most meaningful and touching feedback from our participants who shared with us how this framework, which we'll get into exactly what it is, but essentially it helps to make the connections between our physical, emotional, and behavioral health and well-being so that we're not just chasing more, but we're actually able to recognize our unique signs and decipher them to balance. But we kept hearing this feedback from our participants about how much their lives had transformed for the better and how we even had people join the very next cohort. We had a couple people actually, which, I think it was like 20% of the people in the first one re-upped and joined the second one.
Wow.
And then we did another one and we realized we need to codify this wisdom. And that's when we started writing the book.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah. It almost has I think about when I hear something like this, it makes me think that you're the conduits and creating something here. I mean, obviously it's coming from each of you, but there is something about the way you're describing this, that it's an entity unto itself. Like it has not just an energy, but I don't even know what the right word is, but
I think I know what you're saying. It's almost like it's embodied within us. And one of the things that I think points to that is connects to our origin story as well. The first question that you asked.
Yeah.
So names and origins are really, really important. And my original birth name, the name that I was born with, it was not Anderson. I married that name. My original birth name was Langbaum, which means tall tree in German. And I spent most of my life living like a tall tree in the canopy, way above, not really embodied or connected to my body. And Rootsilience and the framework that Rimi and I have created, which we'll tell you more about, really does that connecting from the very top down to the very bottom into the deep soil and the deep roots. And so what I think you're connecting to is that embodiment.
Yeah. And yet there's a way in which it has a life of its own. Like there's a way in which, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but it sounds like something that there's a set of choices that you step into as well. You have to be open to it, and it's not something that you necessarily have to control, but you have to be open to it and allow it to unfold for you. And I know I'm speaking a little esoterically here, but I think if people read your book or take one of your courses, they're going to begin to understand how this can really serve them in their lives. I mean, we're not going to get into all the details of it here because we want them to buy your book or we want them to take a course with you. We don't want to give it all away, but at the same time, we want to give people enough of a foundation here so that they understand, sort of what it really intends to do to help people get to the next place they want to be, or the kind of growth that people can experience, right?
Yeah, I think that's really well said, Tammy. And I think one of the things I'll add to kind of close out to take my story full circle, I should say, is that when I started, moving, to the Azores, that was a huge leap of faith. And there's so much that went with that. And that's a whole podcast, which we recorded in part, the other episode. But in that self-inquiry, in that having to face my inner critic, in that having to overcome my fears, I had to also go back to that adolescent version of myself, that 13-year-old girl, when I was going through that trauma of my parents splitting and getting into trouble, I had to go back to her in order to embrace my whole self. And it was in that process, which took years. I mean, it took decades, really, but it was that process that then allowed me to embody the wisdom that really is success and teach that to my students.
Yeah.
And so that's how I was able to, a lot of the exercises in the book, and the book provides a number of conscious leadership exercises. It has recipes and foods, as well as mind-body integration practices, and a whole portal where people can be guided online from these practices. But a lot of these were developed from both Samantha and my experience in having gone through the experiences that we wish we had been taught earlier. And so now this book is really the book that we wrote for our younger selves. And it's about how, leadership doesn't need to be so hard. You don't need to be stretched beyond your limits and be pulled off center in order to succeed. And this is the book, and this is why this is so important.
Would you say also that, it's not leadership from the perspective of Rootsilience and the framework and all that you teach in the book and in your other work together, that it's not just about being in an organization. It's about how you take yourself forward. That leadership is embodied within the self. It's not just about being someone's boss or being in your community and taking something forward in your community, but it's also about how you take yourself forward and define your own terms for success. It's not like, oh, now we know this book is Rimi and Samantha's version of success, and everyone else should be successful this way, right? I mean, I know you don't. I know you're both shaking your heads no, but I know that what you're offering is a framework and a number of lenses, on different levels of the human experience that people can take to really take a good, more internal and experiential look at how they can really define success in a far more grounded way for themselves, as opposed to all the external forces that tell us as we're growing up, well, you should be this, you should be that, you need to get good grades, you need to follow this ladder of success and, check off all these boxes on this checklist. So tell us about the framework.
Okay. So I'll jump in and then I'm sure Rimi will follow. The framework has 3 key branches. Of course, we're talking about Rootsilience. So with that tree metaphor, we have 3 branches of our framework. And the first one connects to conscious leadership and conscious leadership practices. And so the book follows the ancient chakra system for each of the chapters. And so we have a chapter, for example, on the crown chakra, which is the very tippy top of our head. And we have conscious leadership exercises and thought-provoking prompts and journaling questions that people can actually use. The book is very colorful, and it allows for real-time, analysis and then reflection around those key themes and for each of the chakras. And then the second branch is healing foods, and so the book provides all sorts of recipes and ideas for foods that can balance you, again, for each of the chakras.
Oh, I love that.
Mm-hmm. And then the third component, the third branch, is mind-body integration. So Rimi tracks beautiful exercises and practices to balance each of us in the various ways that we need to be balanced. And, it's a very personalized framework. So when you complete your, what we call the Rootsilience leadership map, you will get your own individualized, personalized reading, essentially, of places in your body, mind, and behavior where you may be imbalanced. And so the framework helps to help you bring yourself back into balance.
I love this. I'm enchanted by this. And I wonder if, for those of us who also think in very concrete terms, so if someone was to go through some of the exercises and, adopt some of the, let's say, some of the eating practices or choices, and some of the exercises and build them into their life as practices more, over what period of time might somebody experience a shift into feeling or experiencing more balance in their mind, their body, or their behavior? I mean, and I'm not looking for an answer like, well, when will we all be more balanced? I understand that it's a process, and we, as humans, we go in and out of some balance. But I'm curious if you are able to share a way in which somebody can, start to experience some of the things that we're just talking about here, but really experience them.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And, of course, everyone's going to be different. And what is so unique about this framework is that, as Samantha mentioned, it is really personalized, meaning by taking our Rootsilience leadership map, the user and our reader first understands her unique signs of balance and coming out of balance, or ease and dis-ease.
Sure.
And so that alone can be a huge aha, to just recognize that, I have a strength in zest, for example, which is one of mine. I have a great ambition and motivation, and it's easy for me to pick up and go, which is a great quality. And yet it can turn into an overuse, meaning it can turn into ruminating or being hyper micromanaging or controlling. And so recognizing that sign, whether it's behavior or whether it's a food craving, some people might have a craving, and for me, it comes up as caffeine. I want more caffeine, and I know caffeine isn't good for me. It gets me too worked up, especially when I've already got the zest.
Right.
And so the book, it allows the reader to understand her unique signs at that behavioral or that physical or an emotional level. And then the reader can go right to the chapter of that particular chakra where those signs fall into. And so whether they know about the chakras at all, or whether they believe in them at all or not, it doesn't really matter, except that the chakras provide this amazing organizational lens to be able to look at that. And then to provide those 3 branches, as Samantha mentioned, those leadership exercises, which, in the solar plexus are around, how are you really resting? What does downtime actually look like for you? We have a whole exercise leading the reader through that, and it's a really powerful one. What depletes you, what energizes you is another one. And then the foods that Samantha has put together are recommendations on incorporating anti-inflammatory foods, foods that are good for the gut. And there's a ton of recipes, some beautiful recipes in there that people can try. And the mind-body practices allow some twists, which help to literally move the area of the diaphragm, and also some practices something called yoga nidra, which is a form of yoga that is much more restful and meditative and works the parasympathetic nervous system as opposed to the go, go, go side. And in our experience, when we run the course, as you know, this book started out as a course before it became a book. We had participants go through the course. In one version of it, we did it over 9 weeks. And another version of it, we did it over 6 months. And in both versions, even in the 9-week version, we saw changes in all of the participants, as evidenced by the fact that we started and ended the course with people taking their leadership map. And so at the beginning of the leadership map, they would notice certain strengths, certain indicators of ease and dis-ease. And then at the end, they would take it again. And there were always some kind of shift, which was incredible. And it's not about fixing ourselves. I mean, life is life, but the framework allows each person to understand her unique signs of going off center. And so that we don't need it to be a screeching alarm. We don't need to fall into a life-threatening disease or crash and burn before we stop, before we slow down, before we eat and do and move in a way that's right for us.
Right. Oh, what a wonderful, thank you for that explanation. I love hearing the framework and then getting a sense of how, how someone can work through it and have those experiences. It's really helpful. If someone wanted to work with you or learn more about your work, what would be the best place for them to go and do that, knowing that all kinds of links and access to your book and everything, we'll have all of that in the show notes. But what would be the first place you would suggest somebody go to?
Well, we suggest that you would take the Rootsilience leadership map as the first stop. And you would find that on our website, rootsilience.com.
Okay. All right. So we will make sure that's in the show notes and direct people to that. I know I will be personally going there and personally directing people to that. I love the sound of this. And, people listening to this podcast often are thinking about what's next for them, or are looking for, some next steps. What would be a key piece of advice that you would give someone who's starting to think about what's next and they're trying to clarify that?
Yeah, I think that the biggest and most important advice that I've received and that I would give is to know what's important to you. What really lights you up? Because I think for a lot of us, myself included, I used to chase a job or a position based on a title or a salary or status or just what it would look like or seem like, and a lot of quote unquote ego-based decisions.
Yeah.
And what I've discovered in, moving to another country, starting my own business, and then now co-writing this beautiful book and co-founding this work with Samantha is that when you know what's important to you, when you know what you love, and when you combine that with your unique gifts and skill set, just things have a way of expanding that it's not something you could even put in a box or say, I want to do that. And so it's more about being rather than doing. And as you beautifully say in your book, Tammy, it's working from the inside out. And so I think I'm echoing a lot of what you are doing here. And so that would be my advice.
Oh, I love that. Well, thank you so much, Rimi Chakraborty and Samantha Anderson. This has been, I feel enlightened already. And I can't wait to share your book and your work with more people. It's just, I think you're going to reach so many people in ways that they need to be reached, and that they're going to find that your approach is going to help them get to the places they've been trying to get to. And I'm just so excited about it, and really excited to have had you here and Work from the Inside Out. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy.
Thanks for sticking around to the end of my interview with Rimi Chakraborty and Samantha Anderson. What is your key takeaway from our conversation? If you are interested in any of the resources mentioned in today's podcast, you can find them in the show notes on my website at tammygoulerloeb.com/podcast. Just look for episode 242. While there, you can also subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any episodes. And if you're feeling it, please help me to inspire more people to grow their careers by clicking on the Apple Podcasts button right there. Leave an honest rating and brief review. I have provided step-by-step instructions to make it easy for you. The more ratings and reviews the podcast has, the more exposure it will get. Are you anticipating your next professional move? Check out my award-winning book, Work from the Inside Out: Break Through 9 Common Obstacles and Design a Career That Fulfills You. It's available through my website, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, independent bookstores, or you can order it through your local public library. You can also help sustain the podcast by buying me a cup of coffee at buymeacoffee.com/TammyGL. Since this podcast is self-funded, your support is acknowledged and appreciated. Thanks so much for listening, and remember, it's never too late or too impossible to increase your sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in your work and other meaningful activities. Let me know how it's going for you. I'd love to hear from you. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Work from the Inside Out podcast. For more information, you can find us at www.workfromtheinsideout.com.